Boston wrestling sports and the MWF explodes into a new year of unknown with professional wrestling content galore, and we need you to join our family. Every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. after we review the previous night's Monday Night Raw, it's Wrestling Insiders at your house with the unpredictable WWE Hall of Famer, Mr. USA, Tony Atlas. Wednesday nights after WWE, NXT, and AEW at 10 p.m., you never know who's going to show up on Wrestling Insiders Special Edition. Every Thursday night at 10 p.m. after our NXT and Dynamite review, it's Marty Jannetty's No Holds Barred Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll journey through the 80s and 90s on Wrestling Insiders Party with Marty. Friday nights after the lights go down at the Thunderdome on SmackDown, it's John Cena Sr.'s Wrestling Insiders Fabulous Fridays. Plus, look for classic clips, bonus live episodes, pay-per-view watch-alongs, and more. If you want early, ad-free access to all of our Wrestling Insider talk shows, our acclaimed studio shoot interview DVD library, and to help keep wrestling legends working during the worst of times, for less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks, join our growing family at patreon.com/Boston Wrestling. Expect the unexpected in 2021.
This is Mick Foley.
This is Harley Race.
This is Shelton Benjamin.
This is Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff.
This is the Monster Abyss.
And this is Daniel Bryan.
This is JBL, and you're watching the MWF.
Be there, live.
We hit record. We are recording. And in 5, 4, 3. Wrestling fans around the corner, around the world, this is going to be one of the more unique episodes of this program we've ever produced. As of an hour or two ago, before we're taping it, my wildest dreams, I couldn't even imagine this being a thought in my brain. Before we begin, we want to put everything on the table. From 2000 to 2001, Ed Cohen of the then WWF, who ran the live events department, was a tremendous teacher and mentor to me since the inception of Boston Wrestling in 2001. For 19 years, I feel WWE has been great friends to us. They've helped with many of our live fundraising events, our annual Paul Bearer Holiday Headlocks Toy Drive. They've allowed us to book talent at different times for live events, which is extremely rare with independents. They've been overwhelmingly kind, the little guy in my life, with merchandise and live event tickets. I have many wrestling friends in WWE. I have friends that work in the office in Titan Towers in Stamford, Connecticut, and I'm also a WWE stockholder. I'm a grateful person for the kind things that WWE has done in my life. With that said, last night I came across a news headline that made me feel virtually sick to my stomach. It brought my brain back to a time nearly 29 years ago when I was an 11-year-old middle school kid, shocked by what was on my TV and in magazines and in newspapers about the happenings in the WWF. Since we began producing our talk shows, I've wanted to let individuals tell their stories their way in the most honest way possible. My goal tonight is to not needlessly bash or attack WWE. The company is known to do a lot of good with a lot of charities, but there's also parts about WWE that may not be known to fans of the modern day, that may not be familiar with what happened in 1991 and 1992. And tonight we have a story that needs to be told, that needs to be shared, because beyond the professional wrestling aspect of it, this is the story of a human being that is no longer with us. And hopefully by sharing this story, others can hear it, and hopefully others can learn from it. So with that, I welcome a man who I just met for the very first time today via telephone, via social media, and I almost feel like he's become a fast friend the way we vibed. I welcome Lee Cole to the program. Lee, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Lee, you're down in the panhandles of Texas?
Yes, I am.
Well, Lee is the brother of the late Tom Cole. You may, if you're a diehard wrestling fan, you may be familiar with the name Tom Cole from 1992 when the sex scandals surrounding WWF broke out on virtually every form of media known to mankind. The company faced scrutiny like it had never faced before. in part because of abuse that young children had gone through, or at least accused WWF of at the time. And it was on the Phil Donahue show, which was one of the most popular programs seen by tens of millions of people. It was on Larry King on CNN. It was in every major newspaper across the country. And what Tom Cole went through is something that no human being should go through. What others that you may not know by name and have maybe never come out with their stories are things that should never happen to a kid or anyone, no matter what the age may be, but especially to a kid. And again, just seeing the headline last night that Lee's brother Tom had passed away, it brought me back to just that strange, sick-to-my-stomach feeling I had when I was watching this as a kid on TV unfold in front of my eyes. But Lee, you're a hero to your brother for coming out and deciding to tell his story like this. I commend you for it.
Yes, I appreciate that. And he asked me to do it, so he asked me to do it when he's gone.
And to those fans that may not know, Tom just passed away yesterday, which would be February the 12th. Lee, you with me?
Yes, I am.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just yesterday we lost Tom.
Yes, we did. And I was talking to him on the phone late in the afternoon, and we had a pretty good conversation, but in the conversations before that, my brother's been very depressed, and he told me that, he said, Lee, if something happens to me, you make sure that you let them know what they did to me. And how, he was molested by Mel Phillips, Terry Garvin, and it was a massive cover-up over the years. And it continues to this day between the media, between people just not having enough guts to touch the story because we're talking about $1 billion corporation. But, I blame I blame my brother's death on Vince and Linda McMahon because they were behind the cover-up more than anyone, and their lawyer, Jerry McDivitt. And they know what they did. And to me, his death is on their hands. They may not care, but I care. Tom's 3 daughters care. And Tom hung himself. And, he suffered so much from over the years being attacked continuously. And then when he tried to do the right thing and put it to rest, they attacked him for doing the right thing and just wanting not to hear no more about this. So he couldn't win no matter what side he took or what he tried to do. And it's been continuous attack for 25 years, 28 years. And not only did they attack him, they've attacked me so many times. And I'm sure that after this is over and they hear the podcast, they'll attack me again. And they'll say things about me and, he's a con man and a hustler and all these things. And they'll use everything they can to discredit me. But the fact of the matter is everything my brother ever said was true, and they can never prove otherwise. And they know it. And, it's just a very sad day for me.
Well, our condolences to you, your entire family. Can't even imagine, what you must be going through right now and what Tom went through his whole adult existence. As fans may know, he kind of had a roller coaster of a few years with the company, with them gone during the scandal, then was brought back, then was released again. Maybe it would be best to come from you. Maybe describe Tom's involvement in WWF. Do you recall, as his brother, how he became involved with the company as such a young guy?
Well, I was when I was young, I got married, and I remember I used to come visit Tom, and he'd have his wrestling cap on and stuff, and I would ask him what he would be telling me, hey, I went down to White Plains to Arnold Scolin's show, and there he met Mel Phillips. Mel Phillips at that time, as Vince McMahon will say, he never worked for him, but you can find many videos now with Mel Phillips on them. Mel Phillips basically talked him into coming to wrestling shows, and what Mel did is he looked for kids 13, 14 years old. That's the grooming age when they started looking for them. And he kept certain ones. And Tom was a very handsome kid. And it was a certain kid they looked for. They would bring a lot of kids to the shows, but they would only hold on to a couple of them. And those are the ones that they felt like was worth grooming. And Mel had a fetish, and he filmed it, of him playing with these kids' feet and doing other things. Now it's coming out that he did many other things too, and they kept that quiet for years. And so Tom was part of that, and he used to get nervous because then all of a sudden Mel would want to play with his feet and film it, put his feet between his legs, and he was just do weird, horrible things. And so we're talking 14, 15-year-old boys that they loved wrestling so much, and they're from broken families, and here they are. They're around these wrestlers. It's like this big image, this Hollywood in the ring type thing. And these kids wanted to be part of it, and they let them set up the rings and stuff. And basically what was happening is Mel started the grooming, and he would keep certain ones, and then when they hit 16 years old, he would pass them on to Terry Garvin. And Terry Garvin, the first time he met my brother when he was 16, gave him a job. And then when my brother was 16, he refused the first advancement by Terry Garvin. And then a couple of years later, he got a hold. Mel Phillips got a hold of him again and asked him if he was interested in going back to work at the warehouse. By this time, my brother thought he wasn't going to have no issues with Terry Garvin. So he went to work at the warehouse. And after working at the warehouse for a few days, it turned out that Terry Garvin wanted to see him. So at that time, my brother wanted to give him a chance. He didn't really think much of it. So it was snowing. It was a bad storm that night, and he went to Terry's house with him. And then he sat down with Terry, and Terry put on a dirty movie. And it was, and then he asked my brother if he ever had anybody do that to him. And my brother said to him, "Sorry, Terry, I'm not like that. I just can't, that's not something I'm going to do." And then Terry pretty much kicked him out of the house, and Tom had to go out in the van and sleep during the snowstorm in the van.
Wow.
And the following day, he drove back to the warehouse where Mel Phillips was waiting for him and said, "Terry just contacted me and told me to get ready." And Tom said, "Why?" And Mel looked at him and said, "You know how it is around here. That's the way it works." And that was that. And the devastation started from that point on.
And what years are we talking about, Lee?
This would be the late 80s that this happened, 88, 89. And Tom went a couple of years before I found out about it.
So before the scandal broke out in 1992 throughout the media, your brother had separated from the company for a couple of years at that point?
Yes.
Okay. So, couple of questions.
What he started doing was going to he started going to ECW shows.
Oh, okay.
And that kind of, he started going down to Philadelphia with his friends and go to the ECW shows.
As a fan.
But he still loved wrestling, and, Okay, I'm sorry.
He was that big of a fan that he continued to attend ECW events down in Philadelphia and so on, even after he separated from WWE.
He used to come back to me and talk about this guy named Sambu that would do these crazy things.
Oh, wow.
And, he was a wrestling fan. And there's no doubt about that. He loved wrestling.
Where you mentioned that these incidents with Mel Phillips going after the boys' feet and so on, were the videotapes ever uncovered by anyone?
No.
Where there was evidence of it?
No, and they looked for them because there was a gentleman that bought his stuff. Mel kept everything in a storage center. And when Mel passed away, or before that, Mel started auctioning some stuff off, but then when Mel passed away, it was a pretty big wrestling guy that got his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows what he found in there. But we know that, God knows what he found in there. You got to remember, Vince McMahon reaches out far, and a lot of people want to make him happy.
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I'm weary on any show I go on, because people want to make Vince McMahon happy, and by doing certain things they do, and he gives them gigs or feeds them some breadcrumbs.
It is the nature of the beast in the industry. You mentioned that it was said that Mel Phillips didn't work for WWE or WWF at the time. Was it that Mel was just a 1099 independent contractor, or did they just deny any association with him?
No, they claimed it. A matter of fact, Vince McMahon, in an interview to Phil Muchnick of the New York Post, told Phil Muchnick, "We knew that Mel Phillips had problems with the boys." And they fired him. And shortly after firing him, they brought him back, despite the fact that they knew that he had trouble with the boys. And this is recorded record that he told this to Phil Muchnick. And a story by David Bixby and the Business Insider states that story, and that you can find that story on Business Insider right now. And it states in that story that he told Phil, "We knew we had this problem." So he literally admitted that he knew that this man in his company had trouble with boys, and yet he did nothing to stop it.
Well, the article, it did state that Mel was released from whatever kind of relationship he had with the company in 1988, only to be brought back several months later, with the caveat being that he stay away from ring boy types, underage kids, and so on and so forth. As far as Terry Garvin goes, he was a married man that had kids. Was it a scenario when your brother went to the home where the wife and kids weren't home, or were they upstairs?
They were away.
They were away. Okay.
They were away. But as anybody wrestling fan knows, everybody knew what Terry Garvin was doing and what he was about, because they would talk about it during the actual wrestling shows. They would make fun of them being from the backdoor school of Terry Garvin's and stuff. It was so known what Terry Garvin was about, and this is no secret. And you as a podcaster in this world, I'm sure you've heard many things.
I could go on and on and on with the different legends and Hall of Famers that we've had in the studio that have either come out and told stories or alluded to things that had gone on at the time. But I do want to play devil's advocate. I think that's only fair. For those that don't know, Terry Garvin was an active professional wrestler for some time before going on to work in the office for the World Wrestling Federation in the mid-'80s, where he was one of the top executives. So he would have access to the type of personnel, so to speak, that we're talking about, like your brother and these other individuals that set up the ring and did errands and so on.
Yes, and so to move on further, he at that point, I was living up in Utica, and my brother came to me, and he was really depressed and he was down, and I asked him what was wrong, and Phil Muchnick had just written a story about what was going on in the WWF. And he said to me, Lee, I lost my job and he was telling me about the sexual advances and the sexual abuse and everything. He was holding back, but once he told me, I said, you know what, Tom, we can't have this. You can't allow this to happen. So I called Phil Muchnick, and I left a message, and I was shocked when Phil called me back right away. And then I told him that Tom is really upset, and that I think that Tom's going to sue him. And at that point, Phil said, well, I'm not going to touch this, but once you have a lawyer, let me know. So Phil wanted to do the right thing, and so he did, basically. Phil was a very honorable man, and they put him through hell, and he was the most honorable man out of this whole entire scenario. And they want to take that honorable man apart, the WWF, as we will talk about. And so he basically, at that point, we went and we hired a lawyer in town. And the lawyer took the case, and he started doing depositions, and we found more and more boys, and he took more depositions. And but at that time, what happened was Geraldo Rivera had a show, and there was a reporter named Brooke Skolsky, and I'll never forget her because what she did was very dirty. she called me up, and I told her, I said, look, you got to speak to my lawyer. And she said to me, she says, well, if you don't speak to me, I will come up and park on your lawn, put up the antenna on the van, and I will sit there until you come out and speak to me.
Wow.
So basically, she forced us to set up an interview. And we did it without our lawyer knowing, which was a dumb move.
Now, why did you do that?
Because we were young and dumb.
Young and dumb.
For no other reason.
Sure.
There was no reason for doing it. The most logical thing to do is say, no, talk to our lawyer, don't threaten me, and I should have called the lawyer. That's the reality of it.
Did the Geraldo interview come out bad? Or did it come out maybe edited in post-production, or it made you look bad?
Well, what happened is Geraldo, she comes up and we do a show, and she hires a place called Buckshot Videos, and we went and shot it up in the hotel. She paid us $600 each, and this is 1992.
It's not bad. Yeah.
So, so here I am. I'm thinking, well, if you're doing an interview, you're giving us money for it. And then, she basically calls up her show, and they got approved, and they gave Tom $600, and they gave me $600, and they shot the show. And then the following day, she comes back from the motel and goes, Geraldo wants you to come down to New York. And so I said, okay. So what happened is we drove down to New York with my friend Steve. And my friend Steve, he's written a lot of, he signed a lot of stuff saying that this stuff happened. So we went down and we did an interview. Well, Tom did an interview with Greg Rivera, Geraldo's brother. And then after that, it was right before Vince McMahon found out about everything. But what happened, what was bad, that went really bad down there, was there was a lawyer that worked for Geraldo Rivera's show. And Book Skulski, it was Book Skulski's boyfriend. So she said, well, why don't you get a good lawyer? My boyfriend is a New York City lawyer. And here I am, I'm thinking, wow, I get a big-time lawyer to this. And so, but it turns out that he had connections to the WWE, the Hasbro toy account at that time. So he could not be involved. So he got his father, who was a retired, and when I talk about this stuff, it just keeps on going and going. It's a fascinating story, and it's all true, and everything I've ever said is true, and David Dixon, that wrote the story, has researched.
I'm sorry, Leah, you're still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
I'm sorry. We lost you for a second. I know you don't have the 5G down there in Texas yet.
Yeah, well, yeah, in the mountain, in the deserts of Texas, in the Panhandle. So what happened was, where did I leave off with you?
The female that had interviewed you had tried to set you up with a lawyer, and it kind of went awry from there because of their involvement with Hasbro, which owned the WWE action figure line at that point.
Exactly. So he could not get involved, so he got his father involved. His father was a retired, he was retired from the alcohol firearms. He was an agent for them, and he did a lot of investigating during this time. But he found us a lawyer named Alan Fuchsberg, the father. The father was a Supreme Court judge in New York.
Wow.
And so we went out to Rye, and he lived in his big mansion on a golf course. And all he did was he kept falling to sleep during our interview.
Falling asleep?
He couldn't stay awake.
Really?
And then then he said, well, I can't do it, because it was obvious he couldn't do it because he couldn't stay awake. So what came in, and his son came in, and the daughter. And they said, we'll do it. And I'll never forget, this is when I should have gotten nervous. Alan Fuchsberg, the son, he looks in the newspaper and he looks at his sister and goes, oh, look at that article. Can you believe that article? He goes, yeah, we got to take this case. And it was like he was starstruck by the article.
Really? Okay.
And a real lawyer would never, a very top-of-the-line lawyer would not be starstruck by an article, because they already would have had their own plenty of articles, And so he invited us up to his office. It was right across from the. It was right in the middle of Manhattan. It was right across from the. And one thing that creeped me out when I went up there was he was old, and you could tell the father was there for years, and the kids had taken over, and at that point, he said, "Look, we're going to put you up at the hotel." It was above Grand Central Station. So he put us up there, and then he called me the following. We're up at the hotel, and he calls us and says, "Look, well, that night, what happened is Vince McMahon went on to Larry King, and by that time, he found out who Tom's name was, and Larry King asked him about Tom Cole." And instead of attacking Tom Cole, he says, "Oh, he sounds like a kid. He's a kid that here worked for us." He admitted Tom worked for him. And I'm thinking to myself, you're just admitting that this kid, 14, 15 years old, worked for you.
Which is
You
odd.
didn't pay him on the books. You paid him under the books. So right there, he's admitting that Tom worked for him for several years. And so then at that point, our phone rings, and it's Munchnick, the lawyer, and he says, "Look, this is Saturday night." So he says, Vince is coming into town with his lawyer tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So Vince comes sneaking into town, and back then on Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning, the streets are dead in New York City, especially the business district. And he came in the next day, but before we were going to the meeting, they called me at the motel and asked me to sit the meeting out.
Who was they?
The lawyer, Pittsburgh, says, "Well, he goes, bring your brother. I will protect your brother." And then our lawyer Ventura went, but he didn't want to be seen, so he hid in another room during negotiations. And so basically during the negotiations, Alan Pittsburgh got up and left my brother in the room alone with Vince McMahon. And Alan comes back and says to him, "Well, we want $750,000 to make this go away." And Vince McMahon jumps up and looks at Alan, and he looks at Tom and goes, "I'll fight you." He goes, "You back me in a corner, I'll fight you like you've never been fought." Instead of Alan saying to him, "Well, we have 25 shows on desk right here where people want to speak to Tom," he got intimidated. He backed down from the amount. And once again, he leaves the room. He leaves my brother in there with Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon starts saying, "Oh, I know what you're going through, Tom. I was molested too, and we're here to help you." And so the next thing you know, Tom agrees to take his job back and get back pay. And then they came back to the motel. He walked in and with his lawyer, who was in the next room, and the lawyer says to me, "Your brother just made a huge mistake. Just agreed to go back to work," and basically took his back salary, which at that time came to about $55,000.
And how old was your brother at this point?
I think early 20s, maybe
Early 20s,
21.
okay. And what?
To him, $55,000 was a lot.
Sure. And you're talking, 1992, $55,000 then is a lot more than it is now.
So far, Vince McMahon has admitted, "I'm going to pay you because we owe you back pay, and you lost your job because of sexual abuse." He fired Terry Garvin. He fired Mel Phillips, and he fired Pat Patterson. They were all fired on the same day. When right before the meeting with my brother, he fired them.
From what I recall, and I might be wrong on this one. I'm sorry.
Huh?
From what I recall, with Patterson, he tried to resign. Is that true, or was he actually fired?
No, he was fired.
He was fired as well, as I know the other two were.
According to the papers, all three were released.
Okay.
According to the story in the New York Post. And so what happened, though, Vince was talking to my brother. Then my brother said to him, "I just want to let you know that there's another person involved in this." My brother goes, "Who's Lee?" And then Tom says, "Lee's the one that put things together. He's my big brother." So everything changed at that point. Then Vince is thinking, "Oh no, we have another person involved." So at that point, they thought it was just Tom involved. And so he says, well, we're going to go to do the Phil Donahue show tomorrow. So why don't you bring your brother and meet me down there? And so we met at the Phil Donahue show. And he came in 2 limousines. One limousine had Linda, but Elizabeth. And then he came in. And I remember, I just got there, and he walked out of the limousine. And he had this red suit on. And the first time I seen him, it was like, wow. You know, when he walks into a room, he takes it over.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every eye goes to him. When he got out of that limousine, everybody there, their eyes went to him. And he came over and introduced himself to me and introduced and then we went into the studio for the Phil Donahue show. And his plan was to sit next to Tom in the audience. And then he's going to have Tom sit next to Linda. And then when they brought Tom up, Vince was going to say, well, Tom Cole was right here, and we just negotiate everything, and Tom Cole's back working for the WWF at that time. But it didn't work because Barry Orton, who I was very good friends with, Barry O, they call him, I was very good, me and him became very good friends. He knew something was up because he hadn't heard from me. And he told the other guys, something's up. Don't bring up Tom. But they were ready to use Tom, but they, Barry made the right move there. You know, I was feeling guilty as hell because I'm in the green room in the back, and I'm looking up, and then they're saying that, then they came out with a false story that I defended Vince McMahon, which came out in the story and played in Penthouse, which is a lie, and I even called Penthouse. And it was, but what they tried to do is minimize me as much as possible. And, but so they told us that they would, at that time, he wanted us to come back to Titan Towers with him. And so I went in one limousine with Vince, and Tom got in a limousine with Linda and Elizabeth. And it's kind of funny that he bought Elizabeth and made sure that Elizabeth was in the very vehicle that my good-looking young brother was in,
Yeah.
And she was a very attractive woman.
She sure was.
Very beautiful woman. And she had that look, that innocent look, and
yeah.
And she, she stayed right next to Tom. Sat next to him with Linda, and it was so well thought out by Vince. It was, starstruck. Yes, we were starstruck. There's no doubt we were starstruck.
And who wouldn't be?
And
look at that. Look at the other people that were on that panel. For folks that aren't familiar with the Donahue episode, it is available on YouTube. You had a who's who of some great talent and superstars known worldwide that were on that stage with you as this was going on, in addition to, the legal aspect you were facing with the McMahons directly.
And I was talking to Bruno Sammartino several times a week.
Oh, really?
Me and him became very close. And when he came back to the WWF for the Hall of Fame and stuff, I was shocked. But I can kind of understand where he was coming from, But I was shocked that he came back because he told me he told me how evil Vince McMahon was. He told me that once he took over for the father, everything in the company became bad. He had a lot of respect for the father, but he had no respect for the son. His exact words. And and then, he lost his job and he went back to Pittsburgh, and, it wasn't good for him for close to a decade before he made up with them.
Oh, much longer than that. I think the scandal was 1992. He wasn't inducted into the Hall of Fame until 2013. So you're talking a little over 20 years.
Yes. Yep. And so, we went to Titan Towers at that point, and I appreciate you letting me put this story out in details, because usually media people cut you off. They don't really care about the details.
I don't want to interrupt. I want you to tell the story the best you remember it, and your thoughts and opinions
Yeah.
and memories on it the best you can. I jot down little side notes, and when we do have maybe little gaps in conversation, I'll get to the questions I have. But I want you just to put it out there from, your heart, the way you feel you're telling it best for your brother.
Okay. So here we are. We're in limousines heading toward Stamford, Connecticut, and we're heading toward Titan Towers. And then we get there, and we go upstairs. Then they split us up at that time. I went to Vince's office, and Tom went to Linda's office in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And Vince and I were having one-on-one conversation. First thing, I noticed a hammer in his room, and I looked at it, and it said William Buckley on it, and it said William Buckley to Vince McMahon. And then we started talking about the hammer a little bit, and then he was talking to me, and he came. You know what? He was, he calls me a hustler, but compared to him, I am no hustler. He had me eating out of his hand, and he was telling me everything I wanted to hear, and. At that time, he said to me, well, we're going to have a meeting in the middle room here across the hallway. And everybody met in the office, and then Jerry McDivitt came in. And Jerry McDivitt is like a superb lawyer, and he's the house lawyer. He still is their house lawyer after all these years. And that gives you an idea how good he is.
Right. It's a long time.
Yeah, a long time. And then we went over, and they were they were talking to me, and then they wanted to know the names of the other children. And we talked about Chris Lose, because the only reason they knew that is because they made the lawyer that took the depositions in Utica give him information. They made him turn that over to the new lawyer. And Alan Fuchsberg handed that right over to them right away. So here he is handing the depositions over to the other lawyer, which it never went to trial. It never officially became a lawsuit. It was a threat of a lawsuit,
right?
And that has to be, so it basically it goes over to, and they're looking at us, and then Vince McMahon starts asking me a couple things, and then when he said to me, "Listen, I have Fairfax, I believe it was, private investigators. I want you to sit down and talk with them, Lee." But at that time, I had a warrant out for my arrest for a felony.
At that time, you had a warrant out for your arrest in 92?
Yes.
Okay.
In 1992. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, I ain't talking to no investigators. These people don't know. I don't want them to know.
Right.
So I said, no, I'm not going to speak to him, Vince. And all of a sudden, Vince looked at me, and I seen the veins in his head grow. And, he's like, Lee, I want you to speak to them. He started getting demanding. And I said, Vince, I'm not going to speak to them.
Why do you think he wanted you to speak to them?
Because he wanted to get more information on the kids.
I see.
The other kids.
I see. So he had no idea what was going on in your own personal life, as far as you know.
None. At that time, none. They didn't even know who I was until Tom told them at the negotiation.
I got you. Okay.
So all of a sudden, Tom threw my name in there. And then all of a sudden, that's when things took a turn.
So he wanted you to be an asset to him at that point.
Oh, without a doubt.
I got you. Okay.
Without a doubt.
Okay.
So at that point, he tells us to go back to the motel. I could tell he was getting mad, and he didn't want us around at that point. From what I understand, he has a pretty wicked temper. So maybe we were lucky he told us to leave. That's how I look at it.
Could have gotten a little nasty, yeah.
Yeah, here we are, a couple young guys caught in the middle of his office, all alone in the middle of Titan Towers. Things weren't look too good for us at that point.
So just so the folks at home that are listening can understand, in this room, as far as I take it, it was you, your brother, Vince and Linda McMahon, and Jerry McDevitt. Was there anyone else? Or?
Yes. You know what? I believe there was one other person that was high up. I don't remember the name.
Okay.
It was one of his top guys.
Okay.
And so what happened is we went back to the motel. We got all situated in and stuff. And then it was contacted us. Vince and Linda contacted us because they wanted to take us to dinner.
To dinner? Okay.
So they come over. Yeah. So they come over to the motel and pick us up for dinner. Vince shows up in this really sporty car, and he makes me get in the car. Well, he asks me. And you don't have to ask me to get in the car with Vince McMahon, some fancy car. So I got right in the car. And then Tom went into Linda's car. and they split us up and started talking to us separately. And then they got us to the restaurant. And we got to the restaurant. The restaurant, it was about 6:30, 7 o'clock. The restaurant was shut down, and just nobody was in there but us.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it was shut down. It was like, and then he said, get whatever you want. And, you know, it was kind of funny because then he started putting these credit cards on the counter to pay for it. And I'm like looking down at the credit card saying, damn, what, I have never seen a credit card that looks like that. You know, like, you know, it was like, there was a gold Master Express, Express card. And so at that time at the dinner, then they took us back to the motel, and they sat with us downstairs, and they were talking to us still some more. It was like they were trying to really make us impressed with them. And then as we were talking to them, all of a sudden these wrestlers started coming up and talking and saying hi to us. And
wrestlers came into this motel?
Yeah, they were in the hotel, yes.
Was there an event
going
on? Or
I don't know, but the first person we met was Slick. I believe his name was Slick.
Slick, yep, the Doctor of Style, Slick, yeah.
Jimmy Hart. You know, the English guy that did his announcing at that time.
Lord Alfred Hayes.
Lord Alfred Hayes. They came up, and there was a couple wrestlers, and it was like he was trying to, like, these recognizable faces say hi to us to impress us more. And then at that time, they left. And then it's funny because Tom and I got in the elevator. We went up to our floor. We got out of the elevator. We looked at each other. And I said, that guy is so full of shit, Tom. And Tom goes, I know, ain't he? You know? And we were laughing. We knew he was full of shit, you know, at that time. And then we went back to our room, and then we had another meeting the following day at Titan Towers again. And that's when it all went crazy. When I got to Titan Towers, I told him, I said, so, you know, you're giving my brother money. What am I getting? And Vince says, Vince looks at one of the guys and takes $10,000 out of petty cash. They give me $10,000. And I put it in my pocket. Then he tells the other guy, they didn't have $20,000. So they tell the guy to take me to the bank. And they got me $9,999 out of the bank. And they gave me that. So at that point, I have $20,000 in my pocket. And once again, here we are, we're kids, you know, we're young guys, and I got 20 grand in my pocket. And, you know, you put 20 grand back then in anybody's pocket, it's a lot of money. And Tom stayed, and they said to me, I told them that I was going to go back to Boston. At that time, I lived in Utica, and they gave me the money based that I disappeared. They wanted me out of Utica, they wanted me out of my home, and they wanted me to leave. So Tom said, well, he'll go to Boston. He knows Boston really well.
Who said they wanted you out of Utica, New York?
Yes, they wanted me out of Utica because the media knew where I was.
Whose request was that?
It was theirs.
WWF?
Tom told them right in front. Yeah, Tom told them right in front of. He told Vince directly. He told Vince that my brother he doesn't want any part of this anymore, and he's gonna go to Boston.
So it was Tom's idea for you to get out of Utica?
No, I told him I would do it.
But who asked you to do it?
They did.
WWF.
They wanted me away from the media.
I got you. Okay.
And so what I did is when I left, I got on the train and went back to Utica. I wasn't going to move. I was telling them what they wanted to hear. I had a house there. I wasn't going to move. I was going to move for $20,000. You know, and you know, and then Tom got mad at me. And he says, well, I thought you were leaving. I go, no, I'm staying here. And this is when the WWF really started coming down hard on me.
All right, this is if we could for a second, right now we're in the timeline where you're leaving Stamford and going back to Utica. Let me just ask you a couple questions that I have from what you had just come across. Did you find it odd that they kept separating you, putting you with Vince and Tom with Linda?
I didn't find it hard because I'm a street guy. I know what's going on.
You knew what was going on.
Tom,
okay.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. You could feel the hustle. You know, I grew up in Times Square. I spent a lot of time in the Boston Combat Zone. Back when in the 80s, when the Boston Combat Zone was the Boston Combat Zone. I knew the streets really well. There's no doubt I was a street guy. There's no doubt that I didn't mind making money off of this at that time, because what are lawsuits about? Making money.
Right.
And and Tom had an opportunity to make a lot of money, but he chose to take another way. But I really loved him and I respected him, and I was kind of like, oh, good, he'll get his job back. Maybe everything will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the way it went.
And you also noted that during that meeting, Vince McMahon wanted you to meet with the private investigators about other kids. Could you, I don't know if you know precisely how many, but could you guesstimate how many different kids do you think were involved with this over the years? Or do you even have any idea?
Yeah, hundreds of kids were involved.
Hundreds of kids, really?
Without a doubt, hundreds of kids.
You, in your opinion, you think that hundreds of kids were involved?
It's not an opinion. It's not an opinion.
You feel that's fact?
It's fact.
Wow.
Mel Gibson, he should be so lucky. Mel Phillips started this whole thing in the 80s. Throughout the 80s, he basically did this. Mm-hmm. He always ran with a group of 5 to 6 kids, 7 kids. And he always had a group. And he always went from the he kept certain kids. Mm-hmm. So there was a turnover in the kids continuously, and they had this turnover. And they always were going to have a turnover. So, estimate 10 years by these kids going. And how many shows did they have?
You got to, at that point, sometimes 2, 3. Back in 87 and 88, it was so hot there were even four tours a night. They had D-team tours sometimes.
Easily. Excuse me for 1 minute.
Sure.
Okay, I just had to shut my dogs up.
Well, okay. That's just, I'm blown away by that number. We've had legends and superstars here in the studio that have, discussed it vaguely, some more directly than others, but I would have never thought it would be literally hundreds of kids that were involved in this scandal with Mel Phillips and Terry Garvin at the very least.
My brother, they had kids. They had 2 guys that ran with Mel Phillips that were regulars. They used to call Mrs. Phillips. Wow. And the wrestlers and the announcers, they all made fun of him. And one of the kids was very slow, and he was from Lowell, Massachusetts. I'm not going to say his name, but I know what his name is. And
actually, if you told me off the air, I'd be kind of interested to know. I think I might know who you mean.
Yeah, well, a lot of people know him because he's around the scene.
Yeah,
and he's a slow kid, and he went by the moniker of Mrs. Phillips.
Wow.
So, you had the wrestlers calling him Mrs. Phillips. And even the kids that were with Mel laughed about it. Mrs. Phillips. Everybody knew. And this is what people have to realize. You had a black man, and I'm not saying nothing bad because he's black. So you have a black man that's walking around the arenas with a group of white kids. You got Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon inside the building. And they're saying that they did not know it was this bad. So they did not see this black man with all these pretty little white kids?
Other than television tapings, though, and MSG house shows, would Linda and Vince McMahon have been around these non-televised events?
Yeah, well, something, I'm sure he was around some, but a lot of these events were televised because my brother was there.
Oh, with the TV tapings, no doubt.
One show, he got chased by. One show, they used him. He got chased by the Moondogs around the ring.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's going way back.
Yeah, it's going way back. That's exactly right. It's going way back.
Lee, let me ask you this. You heard some of these conversations that your brother had with Vince McMahon. He admitted to the fact that he had been molested himself in life. Do you think at any point that Vince and Linda McMahon cared about these kids that were hurt at all? Maybe somewhere they were actually trying to do something good at all?
No, absolutely not.
And why is that?
The way they treated my brother, how brutal they were. My brother hung himself. He never, ever got over what happened to him. Mm-hmm. He cried about it every day. The only reason he stayed alive as long as he did is because he had 3 beautiful daughters and a wife. You see the pictures I sent you.
Yes, and we're going to insert those during this interview as we continue our conversation.
Yes, and you could see how beautiful his family was. You could see what a handsome man he was. He was a bodyguard. He was a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He was a bodybuilder. He took care of himself. He was a health freak. And, everything just fell apart as he got older. He just, and he would cry to me on the phone saying to me, they did so much more to me that I didn't tell you because I didn't want to tell you. It's embarrassing.
My God. And think of what he did tell you.
Yeah, and he was mad at me when I talked about how Mel masturbated when he was playing with the feet. My brother got mad at me. He said, "Why did you tell him that?" He wanted it to be they just played with his feet. He didn't want the masturbation part.
As I said when we spoke on the phone earlier, right now the Me Too movement is a big thing out in Hollywood, and you think about what it's like for a woman and a male. A male to overpower a woman, but for a guy on guy, I mean, think about how embarrassing that must have been for him to go through that, and then to have it publicly out there. I mean, you don't know my story. My gosh, I'm physically disabled. I walk with a cane because I was in a car wreck back with the Iron Sheik and an independent wrestler. We got hit by a drunk driver back in 2005. And to me, every day I'm questioned, well, what happened to you? And, even if people don't think or mean anything bad by it, you always have it in your head. And to him, there were probably people that had no idea what had gone on in his life, but maybe gave him a second look or maybe asked him a question in a certain way that had no ill intent, but it brought it back to the forefront of his brain. So I can maybe resonate in just a little bit in that way, even though it's two completely different things.
But I do not believe that Vince McMahon was molested. I believe Vince McMahon said that because he knew my brother would want to hear that. Vince McMahon is a ruthless man. Mm-hmm. And he will do anything to accomplish any goal he has. I don't have to tell people that because people have dealt with him over the last decade or longer than that. I mean, the last quarter decade.
39 years he's owned the company, yeah.
So they've dealt with him, and, getting back to the restaurant.
Okay.
So we're at the restaurant, and then they take us back to the motel, and we're still at the motel. We go up there the following day. Then like I said, I go back to Utica. And then at that point, my brother comes home and he's driving a new Jeep. And I remember the Jeep because my brother drove it in the driveway and he didn't know how to drive shift and it had a shift in it. And you know what happens when someone drives a shift, they don't know how to drive.
Right.
Literally he was driving this in Brooklyn and it all fell out of the bottom. So, that's how well he drove his shift. And, so he bought, he got the Jeep out of it, and then they were sending all the shows to the house continuously. But at that time, I called up Linda and I said, I like to go to WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm.
And
this would be WrestleMania 8 at the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, which you have pictures of my family there.
Yep.
And Vince McMahon, yes. And so we went to. They sent us the tickets, and it was funny because I went with at that time, now my ex-wife, I went with her, my son, and my friend Steve. Steve was always involved because they involved him in my life to try to destroy me. And so
now, wait a minute.
Went back to
this person, Steve, that you just mentioned. Who inserted him in your life to destroy you?
No, well, he was my best friend. He was Tom's best friend. Mine and Tom, we were a group. There was 3 of us.
Okay.
We hung out. And then, Tom took Steve. Well, I'll skip to that part. So what happened was they basically took me. I'm sorry. I was at my house. Tom comes home with his Jeep. And then we started getting all this stuff in the mail, shows. And I remember, and that's when I got a hold of Linda, and she gave me that. She sent me a couple tickets and backstage passes, and then we in Indianapolis. And my friend Steve came with me, and it was Steve, and it was my ex and my son Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out there, and when we got there, we had backstage passes, and we got right into the back. And I remember that because we were the only non-wrestlers in the back. At that time, they were very strict on who went in the back.
Sure.
Yeah. But before that, I went to see Tom in a motel, and I went inside a motel room, and Vince was doing a show. And he was talking about how the show was going to go on, and, he was pretty much, just telling them what was going to happen in the show.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is in Vince's hotel room, and we're talking to Vince, and then Tom's taking the Mountie around, and that's when I told you he's being terrorized by what's
The
their
Nasty
name?
Boys.
The Nasty Boys are trying to run him down with their cart.
Well, I can
And
attest
the
what a difficult those two can be, as we just had him here in the studio as part of our toy drive in December. But
Yeah, and it was kind of funny because the Mountie was like, "I can't go any place. They're picking on me, abusing me." He was literally scared. So they told Tom to go around with him. I don't know what Tom would have done. I don't know what Tom would have done with the Nasty Boys, but at that time, So we went to the show that night. We met everybody. They treated us really good, but we didn't have no seats. We didn't, it said we had seats on the tickets, but when we got, Linda gave the seats away because she didn't think we were going to use the tickets and drive there.
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and then when we got there and we had the passes and everything, and when we came in and she seen us, I guess she was like, so they took 2 chairs and put them right, 3 chairs, and they put them right at ringside,
Mm-hmm.
and we sat and watched the show. And then when everything went to hell, one of the first things Belinda says to me, "I gave you tickets to the show. Why are you doing this?" Like she was like throwing it up to my face.
Why were you doing what? What was she upset about?
Well, here's what happened. Well, then when I went back, my friend Steve told Tom that I was going to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to write a book. And a lot of people say I'm going to write a book, and they never write a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I was one of those guys at that time. I have a manuscript now, but at that time I had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is Tom mentioned it with Steve to the legal department over at. They took Steve. They flew Steve up to Titan Towers.
WWF flew Steve.
They flew Steve.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So they flew him there. He spoke with the legal department about what I was doing. And he also told them that I had a warrant out for my arrest.
Oh.
Yeah. So at that point, they pretty much hinted to take care of it. Let's get your brother out of the way. And they knew it was a felony warrant. They were under the assumption I was going to go away for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And so what happened at that time, they came back, and it was just kind of strange because it was a Sunday night, and I had a police car pull up, and they were knocking on my door, and I had my son with me, and I didn't want to answer the door, so I didn't answer the door. So right after they left, I took my son, went to a motel, called his mother, and said, "Come." So I said, "Something's up. Please come get our son."
Mm-hmm.
So she went and took because we were at that time separated.
Okay.
So she came and picked up her son and took her back to her house. And the following day, I'm standing there in the house, and 2 detectives came, and I had 2 pit bulls, and they said, "Well, we're going to talk to you about your pit bulls." They started talking to us, and they go, "Oh, by the way, we also have a warrant for your arrest." And they arrested me. And they took me to Utica, and at that time I had 2 warrants out of New York City. One was a felony warrant. One was out of Westchester County, and I had a misdemeanor warrant out of Queens. And I'm not going to play no lie. I grew up in the streets. I did some stupid things. And nothing where I ever hurt anybody, just stupid things.
Life circumstances.
Yep. And what they didn't realize, though, is when I got the $20,000, I called up the Department of Probation in White Plains, and I told them that I want to pay my restitution. But at that time, my probation officer was arrested because he killed his mother in a fire. And I told this story to Bill Bixenspan, who did a story with recently. He researched it and said, "Son of a gun, Lee, you're telling the truth."
What an amazing story that is. I remember you. That's why I chuckled a little bit. I remember you told me that earlier today.
Yeah, he goes, he goes, "No, Lee, he didn't kill one person. He killed 3 people in that fire." I'm like, "Oh, wow."
That was the only thing he had wrong was the number of the quantity, yeah.
Yeah, wrong number of people, yeah. And so I stopped checking in with probation. So they put a warrant out for my arrest. And it's Westchester County. Back in those days, you didn't mess around with Westchester County.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Westchester County was like the leading county in the country, actually. And you just, if you had a warrant, they're going to come get you and bring you back. But so I talked to this gentleman named Joe Hand, and I paid him restitution.
Mm-hmm.
I paid him the whole restitution I owed. And he says, "Okay, we're going to drop your, next week I'm going to drop you out of the system. I just have to go before the judge." But they arrested me before I got dropped out of the system.
I see.
And they brought me down. They brought me down to Westchester County. And when I went down to Westchester County, I went into court a couple days later. And the judge said to me, "Well, I don't have this in the system." He goes, "I'm going to bring you back tomorrow, and I'm going to give you 3 to 5 years if you're lying to me about the probation being paid." He says, "Your probation officer better come from Yonkers and be here tomorrow." So they sent me back, and then they brought me back to court. And by the grace of God, he was there. And the judge says, "Okay, we're dropping the case. Your case is over." So that was the case they were going to put me away in. But then they had to transfer me down to New York, and that was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, and my brother bailed me out.
Oh, wow.
And my brother Eddie bailed me out on that. It was a misdemeanor. And then he brought me back to the house, and he says, "Lee, I just want to let you know it was Tom and it was Steve that turned you in." And I was shocked. And so I called my friend Steve up, and right away he started crying on the phone. You know, and he was like, "I'm sorry, Lee, they made me do it." And I said, "Well, I want you to write a confession." He wrote up the confession. He sent it to Phil Munchnick of the New York Post, saying that I went down to Titan Towers. He gave the plane tickets to Phil Munchnick for the flight.
Mm-hmm.
Steve was one of those people that kept everything. So he gave all this information to Phil. And when David Bixenspan did the story recently, he came across all that stuff.
Oh, okay.
You know, he found it. And, you know, he found that he found Steve's confession written out.
What was Steve's motive in all of this to try and turn on you? Was he looking for a job? Was he?
No, he really liked my brother.
Oh, okay.
He just really liked my brother. That special side of him really liked my brother. And, you know, he just, you know, he would do anything Tom told him to paint our house for $20 one time, and he did.
Oh, jeez.
So, yeah.
Good friend to have.
So he did a good job too. He painted it with a brush. So, you know, so he just was very fond of Tom, and Tom asked him to do it, and because he went to Tom and told Tom that about the book I was talking about, and Tom got scared because he wanted to end. He really thought I was writing a book. He just wanted it to be over.
He just wanted peace.
He got caught up in my battle with Vince. And that was it, because at that time I got so mad, I called Vince when I got out, too. Mm-hmm. And I said to Vince, Vince, you are going to be so sorry you did this to me. And then and I'm talking directly at that point to Jerry McDivitt on the phone. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, Vince's voice in the back goes, "I'm sorry you feel that way, Lee." So Vince was sitting in on this call with Jerry McDivitt. And I said to him, you know, you guys should have never done this to me. And the following day, I went on Curtis Leewood's show, and they sent in they told Curtis Leewood to take me off the air. Curtis Leewood told him to go to hell. They sent him a form saying, "We don't want Lee Cole on the air." And basically, he told them to go to hell, then I'm keeping Lee Cole here. And we did the interview. And I talked about what was going on. And, you know, but, you know, and by that time they were working Tom. They had Tom signing papers to bring. Tom signed a paper that gave permission for Pat Patterson to come back to work.
Wow. So you're talking late '92?
Yeah.
I think that's when Pat came back.
Yes, because the first thing they wanted to do was they wanted Tom to give permission for Pat to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Because it stated in when Tom did the agreement with the lawyer, it stated that they could not come back. So basically, the first thing they did was say he can come back.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom said that he can come back because Tom felt like he wasn't as bad as the other two.
Did Pat ever approach him, your brother?
Yes, grabbed his crotch.
Pat Patterson
Pat,
grabbed your brother's crotch?
He had a habit of grabbing everybody's crotch.
Okay.
That was his thing. Or he would look at guys' crotches and lick his lips as he was walking by him.
Oh.
You know, this is why when they brought Pat Patterson back, and recently he retires and he passed away and stuff, and they talk about what a good guy he was, but the WWF was the WWE was a work environment that was horrible for these wrestlers,
mm-hmm.
for all these people. They were under sexual harassment continuously. And I say to myself, what would happen if Pat Patterson worked around women and did that whole day?
Right. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
I find the Pat Patterson subject very interesting because of all the talents that we've had come in and out of this studio. You know, some have been brutal towards Garvin and Mel Phillips for being low-life scum, but, you know, most have said that, you know, Patterson, as far as the ring boys and such went, you know, that he really wasn't involved in that scene, but you're saying it was a little different.
No, He wasn't involved with the ring boys. He knew about the ring boys.
It was knowledge.
Yeah, he
was
the man. How could he? Him and Terry Garvin were running stuff. He's the one that brought Terry Garvin on. You know, if I remember correctly, Terry Garvin was the bigger wrestler. Is that correct?
As far as being a star in wrestling goes?
Yes.
Oh no, Pat would have been the far bigger star.
Oh, no, that's right, Pat was. But he was a friend of Pat's.
Mm-hmm.
And when Pat went to work for the WWF, he brought Garvin in. He wanted Garvin to be his right-hand man. Garvin came in with the blessings of Patterson.
So why is it that you think WWF wanted to bring Patterson back and not the other two? Because he wasn't involved with any underage kids?
Because Patterson was Vince McMahon's right-hand man.
Mm-hmm.
Patterson ran everything. Patterson was the man. Patterson, he was the heart and soul of the company. And I don't have to tell any wrestling insider that. They know that.
No, he was part of the heartbeat of the company, without a doubt.
Yeah, so Vince couldn't lose that. There's no way. He knew if he lost that was going to affect him tremendously. You know, his number one, he didn't care. Garvin offered nothing to that company. Mel Phillips offered kids to that company. If anything, Tom did them a favor by letting them get rid of them too.
Correct.
You know, and basically the reason they didn't get rid of Garvin is because Patterson wouldn't let him.
At one point before this scandal broke, did you ever learn of a time when there was a chance that Garvin could have been relieved of his duties? Or
no, personally, I have not learned of that time. You know, I definitely can't say that. And but I can say that I do know for a fact that Pat Patterson and Terry Garvin was as thick as thieves. And, you know, it just happened that they both, Pat Patterson was a gay man. There's no doubt he was a gay man.
And he's admitted as such. That's no secret.
Yes. And God bless him. You know, no one cares about that. But the fact of the matter, what they do care about is that, you know, I've had many people tell me that have been in that industry and have worked with him that he harassed them.
Really?
You know, and it was a sexual harassment that was going on with Pat Patterson. And, you know, when this comes out and, you know, it depends how many people listens to this and stuff, they're going to get to the conclusion that, Pat Patterson was, because there's a lot of people that have said it. You know, when you walk past my brother and you lick your chops when you're looking at his crotch.
I mean, who would want to be in that environment, right?
Continuously. It was a continuous thing. This wasn't homosexuality you had running around. This was harassment running around. This was child molestation. This was labor laws being broken with the children. You're taking children across state lines in violation of the Mann Act. You are doing so many things that are illegal, and you are a corporation. And I believe a lot that has to do with that is when Vince McMahon took over the WWF. Mm-hmm. The WWF was just still a smaller show. They played a lot of small houses. And then all of a sudden they became big. They got bigger and bigger overnight. And they still had the same people around when they were growing fast. And the same people that were doing the things when the show was small is now working for this company growing massively. No one expected them to grow this quick.
At one point, the gentleman that I mentioned in Cohen, he said that 25% of the gross was just being spent on travel alone, where it got so hot they didn't even have a regionalized schedule, so to speak. So you're right about that. It got probably maybe even just a bit bigger than Vince expected so quick.
Yeah, I witnessed it when my brother got continuously got a mail with the tickets in it and stuff. I mean, I used to think to myself, God, all these people have to be paid to travel around with these shows? That's a lot of money.
Sure is.
And they're sending out tickets.
And again,
they're flying these guys from wherever they live. They're flying them.
Right, yep.
They're sending tickets to Utica, a small airport. My brother's taking a puddle jumper out of Utica, going to Syracuse, then taking off from Syracuse to wherever it goes. So that's got to be expensive.
Yeah, but like I said, Ed had told me about a quarter of the gross from the live events was just spent on the transportation until years later when it became more settled. They had a better idea of the cities they would hit at the certain times each month, and they were able to coordinate it a little so the guys could travel by car a little bit more than just with all the flights. But at least at the beginning and the end of every tour, there was a lot of flying that went on around it. I'm going to ask you this. Do you think that I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you?
No, I'm sorry. Go.
Oh. Do you think that maybe it got so big so quick that maybe, again, playing devil's advocate, that there was so much going on and he was so far away from certain things that Vince McMahon didn't know that this was happening?
No, I can't say that because Vince McMahon has admitted that he released Mel Phillips because of his problem with the boys.
Right.
Why would you bring back a person that you fired because of their problem with the boys?
It's like asking for cancer a second time.
Yeah. The only reason you bring him back is because that man has stuff on you. You bring him back because he has gotten a hold of you and he has told you, you better bring me back.
Do you think maybe that perhaps in theory could have been how that came to be, Mel Phillips' return? Really?
Without a doubt. When you're dealing with very tough, rugged men. You're dealing with a lot of perversion going on at this time. You're dealing with stuff that, one thing about the one thing Vince McMahon has proven to me is the way that he squashed this child sex scandal. And I remember Vince saying to me, he didn't care about the steroids. He knew the steroids was not going to bring him down. He didn't mind them taking him to trial. He knew that he could beat that. But if it got out there about the boys, that was done. Hasbro was already weary of the boy thing. So you got Hasbro here, and they're, if you lose that account, you're dead.
Big money.
Yeah,
big money.
It was huge money. So here you got Hasbro saying, "Hey, Vince, what's going on with these charges with the kids and stuff?" And so,
let me ask you.
So after they turn, I'm sorry.
Let me ask you this: do you think, at the same time, we'll kind of go back to the Donahue show? It was not just the Ring Boys story. There was sex scandals, steroid scandals, all breaking at the same time. And you talk about con men. There were some con men involved that were just creating a variety of stories like Billy Jack Haynes and superstar Billy Graham. Do you think that hurt the credibility of the people that really went through some serious problems for real, as opposed to Fantasyland that were out to fulfill a grudge of some kind, maybe.
Well, here's one question I would ask anybody. Why did Vince McMahon jump all over the Ring Boy scandal more than anything?
Exactly.
Why did he meet with Tom? Why do you think that Vince McMahon thought Tom was lying that he would meet with him? Do you think if he thought Tom was lying that he would negotiate a contract with him, give him back pay and bring him back to work and deal with his hoodlum brother? Why would Vince McMahon let a guy like me walk into Titan Towers? Those are pretty simple questions, and the answers are obvious.
I'm sure there are some WWE defendees that would say, they wanted to do the right thing. They found out what happened to Tom. They wanted to try and make it right. They wanted to treat his family with respect, and they gave him his job back. They gave him the retro pay. They even took care of you a little bit to try and get you out of the media spotlight a little bit. And then we got rid of Garvin. We got rid of Phillips. Pat was really never accused of being directly involved with the Ring Boys, so we got your brother's permission to bring him back into the fold. Is there no way that scenario could have been played out in reality?
Well, then, you've seen the video of what Tom was talking about when Linda McMahon came out and said that she didn't consider Mel playing with Pete a sexual thing.
Yeah.
She said that out of her own mouth. So she's denying that Mel is a pedophile. And then on top of that, you have why did they take my brother and why did they tell him that we'll put you back in college, knowing that he had no high school diploma? And then they made him sign a paper that said, if you fail college, we could fire you.
Oh, really?
And yes. And so Tom signed. And so why would Tom be there signing all these papers without his lawyer sitting next to him? Why did they not say, Tom, before you sign any of this, let's call your lawyer in here?
Right.
So here we have a young kid having all this stuff by professional lawyers like Jerry McDivitt shoving stuff in his face, saying sign it. And then when he gets to the point where he does not want to sign no more, he gets up to leave the building. And Linda McMahon calls security and tells them, don't let him leave the building. They locked him in the building.
Wow.
And that was part of his second lawsuit. And do you know why that second lawsuit ended?
No.
Because Tom just didn't show up.
Really?
He disappeared. He was tired of it. He didn't want to do it no more. I'm guilty for having my brother take out that second lawsuit and fight. Even though my brother always said, the one thing that I have the truth. He always told the truth. Then everybody around him, including me, all had other motives. And I'm not going to make myself look like a good guy in this. There's no doubt that I wanted the payoff in this. And if I said otherwise, I'd be lying. This ain't about money no more. This is about my brother killing himself.
And I think we should state right now, just to interrupt you for 1 sec, I think we should state that there are no finances of any kind being exchanged for this. We're not going to run ads during this. It's an interview to try and tell what I consider to be, as much as a wrestling story, just a real human story. Just to include that, where you were accused of being a con man in the past, and you did get a payoff back in 1992 with the $19,999.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, without a doubt.
You just want to tell your brother's story.
Yeah, and plus, I'm not that man no more. I'm running for council in my town. I am currently in school. I'm almost got my bachelor's degree. I'm on the National Honor Society.
Oh wow!
I live with a wonderful woman. I have 3 insane dogs. I have a son I do a YouTube show with on a regular basis. I'm very close to my son, and I'm not ashamed of my life. You know, I've done some things in my life, but the things I've done in my life, you got to remember, I grew up in the streets. I only knew one way of living.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and this is what they preyed on. I was, you know, if they came along and I was younger and they pulled me in with Tom, the difference between me and Tom, I probably would have went a little bit farther than Tom.
What do you mean by that?
Tom was a very emotional kid. He was very sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
When Tom was 13 years old, my mother abandoned him, and he went and slept for a month in his girlfriend's closet.
Wow.
Tom was homeless when he was a little boy. You know, I missed that, and I was a little more street smart. I grew up in the streets, and Tom was a very sensitive soul, and he was very loving.
He probably felt like he was losing family when he get relieved of his duties, in a sense. Maybe that's why he wanted to go back so bad.
Well, no matter where I ever went, Tom would show up in my doorway because I was like his father.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Tom and I were very close. And any closeness we lost was because of the WWE and WWF. And if I could do it all over again, I would never have done this.
And
because these are ruthless people.
what happened to your recollection from Tom's story? What happened after the doors to the building were locked and he couldn't get out?
He forced his way out. He basically was making a scene.
Oh, really?
You know, and they let him out. You know, everything's in the second lawsuit. You know, a matter of fact, David Dixon's band read the second lawsuit and put everything out there. And when the lawyer was doing that, we were sitting there waiting for Tom to come back, and he just disappeared off the face of the earth. Just left.
He was just emotionally exhausted, probably at that point.
He was
by
done.
Literally years of this.
Yes, he was done.
Let me ask: was he
He
happy?
was mad at me.
I'm sorry.
He was mad at me for extending it.
Mm-hmm.
He was mad at them for calling him a liar. And then even after he left, they continuously kept bringing him back and forth, playing the head games with him.
Do you think that when he went back, he was genuinely happy to be back with the company?
Oh, he was so happy the day he signed back in and they offered him his job. Oh, my gosh. He had it in his head. Part of the contract said that they would bring him back and let him ring announce.
Did he ever get to?
No, of course not. That was never something they were going to do. They weren't going to put the kid that beat him in the ring announcing. They weren't going to do that. You know, and you talked about all these other people that came out. This goes for wrestling insiders, wrestling writers. I'm not going to mention their names. They know who they are. And this also goes for people that came up with these false lawsuits and stuff. They all rode Tom's coattails. And they turned on him out of jealousy. I mean, it was incredible the way they turned on him. Everybody turned on him, including the wrestling people.
Now, why do you think they turned on him?
An article. Meeting Vince McMahon. Here you got Street that's chummy with Linda McMahon. Has ties upstairs.
Right.
And this is something they want. You know, and they don't have it. And here you got this kid. And the way they treated me, you know, you would think that I was Ted Bundy. You know, you literally would. I mean, the media, I mean, are you kidding me? You know, because I've done some things wrong in my life,
right.
You know, and we're not talking, I never hurt nobody. I never used a weapon to hurt anybody. I've never had a domestic battery charge on me, anything sexual, you know, none of that stuff. I did what street kids do.
Right.
Stupid stuff.
So after your brother and Steve got flown into Titan Towers and all that happened, were you still in communication with Tom when he got released in 1993 by the company, or was there just kind of a rift at that point, so to speak?
He was my brother. You know, he, no matter what he did to me, it didn't matter. I loved him. you know, and I always will love him. He was the best brother in the world, you know. You got to remember, he grew up a certain way. You remember, I'm describing to you a kid that slept in his girlfriend's closet.
As a young teenage boy, yeah. Yeah.
Sleeping in his girlfriend's closet, the father walks in one day and finds him naked on his daughter's bed, you know, and next thing you know, half the town's chasing him through Yonkers.
Yeah. God.
you know, and Yonkers is a pretty rough area, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, it's not like we grew up. It's not like we grew. You know, we spent some time in Mount Kisco, but we didn't grow up in Mount Kisco.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's pretty. You know, we're talking Yonkers. You know, Yonkers is right next to the South Bronx. You know, it's a big city. It's one of the biggest. It's like the 11th biggest city in the country, and you know, it's tough streets. You know, and Tom went on, and he was a player his whole life and stuff, and he had lots of girlfriends and stuff. And then he met a woman that he fell in love with, and married her, and they had children together, and beautiful home. Tom made really good money, and he was a bodyguard for the president of Verizon.
Wow.
You know, this is a guy that had a permit from New York City to carry a gun, so you know he's not a criminal. You know, the hardest thing to get in this country is a permit to carry a gun in New York City. And he had one, and he had a good life and stuff, but he always had what happened to him in his head.
Did he ever have?
Never.
Did he ever try to have any involvement in the industry after the WWF got rid of him in '93? Or did he just put that chapter of his life behind him?
He did for a while. Then all of a sudden, Linda McMahon decided to run for the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And then they contacted Tom. And they asked Tom to support Linda McMahon. So here we go. And we're talking about what case does the WWE in their life fear the most? Why is this company in 2010, when Linda's getting ready to run, call Tom? Tom on their side. 18 years later, thinking that Tom could still damage them. So then Tom said, okay, I'll support Linda. And you got to remember, the main reason Tom supported Linda is because he got a surprise in the mail one time. When he went back to work for them, he got part of the 401k from WWF. And then that 401k grew a lot of money into it when WWE just went crazy overnight.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people got wealthy, but Tom used it as a down payment on his house. They didn't pay him no money. Tom didn't even know he had that money until it came in the mail.
What a surprise to come in the mail, right?
It was a surprise. He used it for the down payment.
Good for him.
You know, and so he used it for the down payment on the house, and then he came forward and said, you know, my political beliefs are a lot along the lines of Linda McMahon, and I support her. That's what he said. And so here we go. Me and him, I called him up and said, what are you, crazy? You doing this, Tom? And we didn't talk for a couple of years after that. I was very upset that he did that.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, years later, I realized why he did it. You know, these people groom you, and then they come to you, and, you know, in his heart, he still wants to be part of wrestling. Linda McMahon's calling him. He's exchanging emails with Jerry McDivitt all the time.
Wow.
Jerry McDivitt's acting like his friend for years. Jerry McDivitt constantly kept in contact with Tom.
Even after they released him in '93.
He used to tell me what a nice guy Jerry was, and you know, that they talk all the time about their families and stuff. And I used to tell Tom Jerry McDivitt was a snake. And you know, and Jerry McDivitt played him. He played him great. He came off as the guy that I want to be your friend. And he was the guy that whenever Vince and Linda wanted something, Jerry would contact Tom. And that's the way it went. And then all these wrestling people that insulted my brother for doing that back then, they don't understand what it is to be groomed. My brother grew up in the streets and came up a certain way. And after this whole thing happened, he was so horrible with himself, he swore he would never do that again, and he never did.
Mm-hmm.
He walked away from them. Then he came forward and said some things about them, gave a couple interviews after that. But the people that were bad as they were pretending to be his friend.
Well,
it's just the industry. It's the industry in itself, and all these shows. They know, it's like they know who they are, and all you got to do is look at my Twitter to know who I'm talking about.
well, would you like to share your Twitter account for those that may want to follow you?
Yeah, that's Leroy Cole III.
There you go, nice and easy.
Yeah, I'm surprised I got that. So,
I just
and
the whole story is just so sad. And I know you said your brother tried to get help a little later on in life.
yeah, he called up. He called up Jerry McDevitt or sent him an email. He said to Jerry, he says, Jerry, I'd like you guys to help. He goes, I'm really having a lot of issues, and I think that you guys should help me with my therapy. And he goes, I have insurance, but there's some parts of it my insurance doesn't pay. And Jerry told him absolutely no.
And I'm sure that would be because it would almost be like admitting, in legalese, I'm sure they'd look at it as if it was admitting more wrongdoing or something like that. So it's too bad they didn't try and draft some kind of paperwork that, absolved the company of any wrongdoing in exchange for them to just try and give him some help, to try and, get on a better footing in life, to try and get rid of some of the inner demons that he had.
My brother called me when that happened, when they refused, and told me about it, and he was so upset. He was so upset. And I like to say to Jerry McDevitt, Jerry, my brother hung himself. Think about that. I know you got kids and everything, and you played the hustler and stuff, and you kept bringing them back in. Think about that. My brother's dead now. And, I'm 60 years old. Until the day I die, I will never let go of what they did. The media, they want to go after people on the most silliest things. But right before them, they have this thing where this corporation took children across state lines for sexual purposes, groomed them. They actually literally had a line of going from one person to the next person. They have an owner of a corporation that admitted that he fired a man because of his like boys. He admitted it. And still they walk around. Richard Blumenthal, who ran for the Senate in Connecticut against Linda McMahon, his manager, Blumenthal's candidate, the guy that runs his campaign manager, contacted me and started asking me questions about the lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
I told him. And despite this, Richard Blumenthal still voted to have her on the cabinet when she was put on Trump's cabinet. I like to ask Richard Blumenthal, if you knew what these people did, why are you voting for Linda McMahon to be on the Trump cabinet?
So you gave his campaign folks this information, and even during the campaign, the election, they didn't use it?
Nope.
Really?
Both people that ran against her.
Now, I wonder why that is. That's, you're talking about some heavy-duty steroid. Again, I look at steroids as that's. You could make a couple of different arguments, but to me, it's an adult making a decision to make their body look bigger, recover from injuries faster, and so on and so forth. Can it encourage others that may not want to use them to try and keep up? You could make that argument, but that pales in comparison. That's pennies on the dollar compared to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And it meant nothing to them after you gave them all this information?
Nothing. After Richard Blumenthal, I don't know if you ever seen when they went there, and Triple H was meeting before the congressional hearing there, and he stood up, and they all jumped up, the Democrats and Republicans together, and treated him like he was a god. Do you remember that hearing?
No, I didn't see that. No, was that?
Well, I'll never forget that. I mean, Triple H walked into the room, and this is when Trump's in office. Triple H walks into the room, and people, they were struck, every one of them. And they were all smiling, waving to him. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This guy probably took 50 fucking hits before of juice before he walked in. And it's like, it's unbelievable. You're talking about a man that would let his daughter be involved with a sexual line, a sexual story. Are you talking about, just think of the stories, the racism, the sexism, everything, every storyline used and how bad they are and how long they've been letting. Now you have this woke movement going around, but you don't hear nobody saying, hey, what's up with these movements? What's up with this storyline? What's up with this storyline? Yeah. Coco Beware walking around with a parrot on his line, jumping up and down. It's always, wrestling has always been stereotyped. Or, the Jimmy Snuka incident, or the murders, the average life expectancy of a wrestler, the drugs, the steroids. Just think if this many people died in any other company, what would they do to that company?
Especially, a recognized brand, a sports franchise, or a league, or a television series, or something like that.
Can you imagine the Giants? Can you imagine, say the New York Giants football team, 4 or 5 players died on it in 1 year?
Yeah.
Or the UFC is so careful and so violent, and they use gloves.
Right.
But nobody ever died in it. Very rarely do you hear about tragic stories in the UFC about deaths of fighters, even outside the ring, like you hear about with wrestlers.
I attribute it to what we said when we had our phone conversation earlier. I think most people look at professional wrestling as, carnival-like joke, and they don't even take these human stories and these human beings as if it's real in some cases. They just kind of shrug their shoulders, and it's on to the next story, the next person, and the next tragedy.
Yeah. Owen Hart falling down. Probably how many codes were broken that day?
My God, no.
Falling into the rings, and you could think on and on. You could literally sit here and just think. You used to have the old wrestle alliances across the country. You had some bad things happen, but you didn't have everybody dying left and right. Especially once they started using the steroids into their system, going to sleep in motel rooms and not waking up. And you're talking your stars. That would be like Derek Jeter not waking up one day.
And not just the steroids. I mean, look at what we talked about the schedule. We talked about for those that, use the word quote unquote fake. I'd like to see them try and fall in a wrestling ring and tell me how fake it is. But the abuse the body goes through, the pain that you're in, where you have, whether the drugs be prescribed or otherwise, you're in severe pain and you need help,
Yeah. My brother told me stories about when he used to shoot these guys up in the locker room. And he gave me names of these guys.
And it might not be a PC thing to say, but there are medical benefits to certain steroids used the proper way. Used the proper way.
Without a doubt. If you use them the way Sylvester Stallone uses them, maybe.
Yeah.
But not, when you're just using them like Vince McMahon to explode. Look at Vince McMahon.
Right.
He was a little wimpy guy. I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch him at midnight, and he was a little wimpy guy. Remember? He was tiny.
When he was the announcer, yep.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, he's this monster.
Oh.
Our society should be ashamed that they're letting this happen. We just had a man that was sexually abused by a corporation, a company, kill himself. he's not the only one that killed himself, that worked with this corporation, or people that have been killed. Tell this to the woman that Jimmy Snuka smashed the head against the railing. And the only reason Jimmy Snuka got away with it is because he got Alzheimer's and died just in time.
I know. Isn't
And
that
they would have
ironic?
gotten one. Yeah. You know, and so he literally got away with it. So you're talking, you know, here you are. You know, Chris Benoit chokes out his son and he chokes out his daughter. I mean, his wife. And, you know, then he sits in his house. God knows what was going through his mind, or what was going through his house, and who he's contacting, or what's going on. You know, and you have this horrible story, and it never went back to them. Never. You know, and it's...
They're either Teflon proof, or it's like I said, people just look at it as, quote unquote, it's just wrestling.
You know, that's what I think is exactly what you say. The smartest thing that Vince McMahon ever did was make his company entertainment. He knew what he was doing, and it was a very clever move. There's no doubt that Vince McMahon is a very brilliant man.
Yeah.
You know, but many geniuses belong in hell or with the devil. And you know, there's many, someone once said to me, and I'm sure people have heard this, that when you're doing business, dealing with Vince McMahon is dealing with the devil. You know, and you know, people say, you know, and then Linda McMahon does not deserve any passes on this, because she knows everything that's going on, and she was involved with the cover-up with my brother. She was more involved than Vince.
Really?
That's who he met with.
Well, that's right. When they separated the two, you're right. You said he would go off with Linda.
And after that too, he dealt strictly with Linda. Vince didn't want nothing to do with it. Vince was too busy. He didn't want nothing to do with it no more. He passed it on to his wife.
And you don't think in anywhere inside you, and I know right now the emotions are raw, but there was no part of maybe even just Linda McMahon that may have had a sincere interest in trying to help Tom?
You know something? That's a good question. I believe that if there was a sincere part of her, that she, you know, John Dillinger can have a sincere part of him, but he could still go rob a bank.
Okay.
You know, and you know, I think that even Vince McMahon has a sincere part of him. But, you know, but if you have a sincere part, but then you do something to erase that,
right?
And that's what Linda did. Even if, picture this: you're going for unemployment insurance.
This is a great story, and I want you to tell this one.
So you're going for unemployment insurance, and you're at the unemployment, and you work for $1 billion company, and you just get fired. You got fired. They fired you. And then you go down through unemployment. And then the head of that corporation, Linda McMahon, who at that time Vince turned everything over to, walks in, and she's there with the lawyer fighting you so you don't get unemployment insurance. The person that's going to decide this is so pissed that Linda McMahon showed up, he awards unemployment insurance to my brother.
When you told me that story, my jaw just about hit the floor. I had no idea that happened.
And just so people know, that story you read in the Business Insider, am I correct?
I know this. I at least read that he received unemployment and went for unemployment and that WWE contested it. I just had no idea that it was Linda McMahon that did the contesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and he did, and you know, all the evidence is there. David Bixenspan went and got the proof. You know, he went and got the proof. He got the paperwork that said Linda McMahon was there.
Well,
and you know, that was an insult. That was the insult to the I don't know if it was a judge or who it was that was deciding, but that person was upset that Linda McMahon was there. At that moment, that person was like, why is this woman here?
It's probably the first time that judge ever saw anything like it, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, you have people to fight this. So you tell everybody you love Tom and you're trying to help Tom. But when Tom goes to get unemployment insurance, you love him so much that you're going to go there and fight it. And you pay insurance for that unemployment.
Right. It's not like it would have come out of pocket.
And you know why she really went? Because she didn't want Tom to get it, because once Tom gets it, that says she unjustly fired him.
Right. Okay. So,
That's what the issue was.
do you think? Let me ask you this, and I don't know if you maybe know this for a fact or have an educated opinion or an opinion of any kind. Do you think it was the legal people shoving this in their brains that they should, almost be like pit bulls and trying to fight even something as simple as unemployment, or do you think it was at their own discretion?
I don't think Vince McMahon listens to anybody but himself.
Mm-hmm.
Vince McMahon runs his corporation with an iron fist. And I don't have to tell you that.
Right.
I just don't see it. Why wouldn't Jerry McDevitt show up then?
Even then, could you imagine someone at the level of Jerry McDevitt showing up to fight an unemployment claim for a few $100s a week? I mean, even that, the judge's jaw probably would have dropped.
Yeah. I think that the main reason she went there is because she knew if Tom wins, it's basically saying that she was wrong for firing him. She was so sure that when she fired him, that he would get no claim because she was legally firing him for him signing a contract about graduating school. So the person doing that claim found that it was wrong, and that pretty much confirmed what anybody said. You can't send a street kid straight through high school into college.
Right. Yeah. And expect success at least.
Can't. Tom was a very smart guy. He was street smart. He was book smart. But at that time, here you got a kid, and he knows that if he fails, that he's going to lose his job. But the biggest thing is, why wasn't his lawyer, Alan Fuchsberg, in there signing those contracts?
Have you ever communicated with that man in the years since? No.
I would never. It wound up that he was talking to Jerry McDevitt at home from home.
Wow.
He was negotiating with Jerry McDevitt before he didn't even tell us. So we're sitting here in a motel, and he's there negotiating with McDevitt before they even hit the doorway.
Wow.
The stack, it's typical huge corporation, typical couple little working men suckers, us. I worked hard my whole life. I mean, even then I was working. You're going up against these people, they have no respect for you. It's like you're nothing. And then people will say to me, I had people say to me, why are you going after Linda McMahon? She worked for Donald Trump. Because something? I support Donald Trump, but I can tell you this much. I don't support the fact that Linda McMahon worked for him. That was something his people should have stopped because of who she was.
It makes you wonder how much they actually vet. But then again, the McMahons were heavy donators to the Trump campaign and many of Trump's charitable initiatives and, the Republican Party as a whole.
Yeah, and when she left her job, she went over and took over a PAC.
A huge PAC, yeah.
Yeah. So, matter of fact, she was willing to give up her job to go take that PAC over.
Right.
That tells you how important that PAC was. And from what I understand, she did raise a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's, you could talk, you could talk about it forever, but the fact of the matter, it's right there. It's right there in front of you.
Let me ask you this. I'm sorry.
No problem. Go.
In the years that followed, would your brother ever bring up wrestling in conversation with you, or was it just life as it went on to be for him, where he went and became a big success working with Verizon? And
he was very successful, but what happened, he was able to purchase a home. He was making a lot of money. And then, toward the end of his life, the last couple of years, he got to the point when he called me, he was always crying, and I got to the point where I said, Tom, you're upsetting me, please don't do this to me. I got to the point where I just couldn't handle it. Me and him stopped talking for a while. And then we didn't talk in a couple months, and then he called me yesterday. You're there, right?
I'm still here, yeah.
Yeah. He called me yesterday, and it was a little bit over 24 hours ago, and we had one of our best conversations ever. And he was just talking to me and stuff. And then he said to me, Lee, make sure that you remember the promise you gave me. And I said, well, Tom, nothing's going to happen to you. You're doing good. He had a lot of physical issues lately. And I had surgery on my vertebrae, and he was about to get the same surgery.
Oh, wow.
He showed no signs of killing himself.
You had no inclination.
None. And then, he talked to me, and he got off the phone, and about 20 minutes later, excuse me.
Sure.
My brother-in-law called me, and he told me, when he called me, I thought he was going to tell me my mother died. And because my mom's quite old, and she's in New York and those danger zones.
Oh,
and,
yeah, my gosh, right. I'm not even thinking along those lines right now.
Yeah, and everybody on her floor died but her.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And we tell her she's like Nancy Pelosi. The devil doesn't want her yet. and, and so she, I have a lot of blame toward her for what's happened in our life, the way we were raised and stuff. And my brother-in-law called, and I thought he was going to tell me that. And then he told me that Tom just hung himself.
Wow.
And it's devastating. And, all I remember is I said to myself that they can't get away with this. They killed my brother. They broke his heart. They killed him. They wouldn't even cover the bills for his therapy, even though all his therapy was caused by them. My brother grew up a rough life, but he was a free-loving guy. He could handle the streets and stuff, but he couldn't handle what happened to him with them. And never did I think that my brother was going to end his life like this. Never. He has 3 daughters, two in high school, and one is in college.
Never mentioned it over the years at any time.
What's that?
Make a suicide type threat.
Yes, no, he has.
Oh, he
yes.
has? Okay.
Oh, yes, he has. Yes, he has. And he's not directly suicide. He just said, Lee, I can't go on like this. I can't go on like this. This is tearing me apart every night. He goes, I have nightmares about what they did to me. I can't stop having the nightmares.
It almost sounds like a veteran, with PTSD that came back from war.
Without a doubt.
He had an inner war inside himself. He may not have gone to battle on the war field, but in his mind, he had a battle of a different kind, trying to come to terms with not once but twice, being ousted the way he was.
And they said, my sister Maggie told me that his wife, they found the phone on the ground, and they seen that the last call was to me.
Wow.
So I don't know whether he was talking to me when he did it, or whether he just hung up and did it. But it was directly after our conversation. And he always told me he loved me, and we were very close because I was like a father to him. Whenever he was out in the street, he knew he could come to my house no matter where I was and stay with me.
Certainly there's nothing positive that you can take from this, but you did say when you spoke to him, it sounded like he was at peace.
He knew what he was going to do, but I'm very sad of the way he did it because his daughters found it.
Right, exactly. I mean, those poor kids.
And
indirectly.
they're devastated.
And you think about that indirectly because of Mel Phillips and Terry Garvin and whatnot. Indirectly, those kids now are going to have that image, I'm sure, for the rest of their life in their head.
And, the thing is, I think when he hung himself, that he thought his wife was going to find him because he did it in the closet in the upstairs in the room.
Mm-hmm.
He had no idea that his daughters were going to go in there and find him.
I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Again, this situation, this scandal, however you want to describe it, it is, as you said, it's one that's been underreported. It's one that it surprises me when people within the industry, when they say they're not familiar with it. I'm blown away because I remember as a middle school kid just being shocked at all these. And again, a lot of them turned out to be complete and utter BS from con men that were just out to X. And I think that hurt your brother in his real life situation, as opposed to the guy, the announcer for the WBF and the Billy Jack Haynes and the superstar Billy Grahams and those type of people that later came out and admitted that they were complete and utter full of shit. But
well, I like to say one name. When you have someone like Irv Munchnick, who's a pretty powerful guy in wrestling,
mm-hmm.
when you have him on a show insulting a man that's been going through this, kind of mocking him with a smirk on his face when he's speaking about him. And then my brother calls me and was so devastated. He says, "Do you believe this guy's talking this way about me?" When you have someone like that do that to you, don't pretend you care. Don't pretend that you know what sexual abuse is about of children. Nobody, you never get better from it. I'm not going to tell people my past or, many people that you would never expect have gone through this. But if you're going to go after Gina Carano for something stupid, and if you're going to go after all these people for this stupid stuff, and you're not going to go after this corporation for doing this, something's wrong.
Well.
And I'm not talking politics right now. I'm just talking about you have a media out there. We did a story with Tom Brokaw that was about to go to air. Powerful, powerful story. And then you got Embersol, I believe that was his name.
Dick Ebersol, yeah.
He's best friends with Vince McMahon. The story gets shut down.
And that was that in 1992?
Yes.
Okay.
We went to the studios there and everything.
In NBC then with Tom Brokaw. Wow.
Yep. And then we did a show with, and to give kudos to a very brave man, and Geraldo Rivera. We did the show with Geraldo Rivera, and then they put the injunction against him. And Geraldo Rivera was pissed and went on the air and said, Tom Cole, he couldn't show his face, but he showed Tom walking next to him because the injunction was dropped down on him. Mm-hmm. But Geraldo Rivera didn't care. He took that chance. And Phil Munchnick, those are media guys, and David Bixby. Those are media guys that do their job. And they're not scared to do their job no matter. David Bixby, they claimed that he was a hustler and a con man in one of the letters that came out. Mm-hmm. And the man's the furthest thing from it. And then, I do an interview with the New York Post. Not the New York Post, I'm sorry, with the Washington Post. The Washington Post does the interview. She says that they're going to run for it with it. Then she calls me a couple of days later and said they decided not to do the story. And as I'm giving these people information about the story, they're like dumbfounded. They got their mouth wide open. They can't believe this. And here they are. They're confirming this stuff happened. Then they back out of the story. So I guess we just don't take child molestation serious anymore in this country.
I continue to wonder if he got the proper emotional support that he needed after the fact that he was looking to get, how different this might have turned out. And I think that's the saddest part of the whole thing, is that you can't change what happened. But could his present have changed? And could his future have changed? I think there's a good chance.
What would have happened if Jerry McDivitt just left him alone? If Jerry McDivitt stopped calling him every time he needed him? Why couldn't Jerry McDivitt just leave him alone? There's so many people. This is on Tom, too, because he did it. He killed himself. Don't get me wrong. My brother did this the wrong way. But we can't determine what people are thinking at that point. When you get to that point where you're ready to kill yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're at a point where you're like so determined to kill yourself. Look, I can't even picture killing myself. First of all, it makes too many people happy, and so I just couldn't do it. But my brother, he had no enemies. I was always there. I always took the brunt for him. My sister Maggie, she's devastated. Very successful woman, but she's there now, and she's devastated by what happened to him. And then my sister Joan, and my brother Danny died 2 years ago. My brother Alice died a year ago. This is the third death in my family in 3 years, and it's all the younger children.
Very strange.
Yeah, it's the ones that ran together as a group. There's only one of them alive now, and there's only one co-brother alive now, and that's me. And I'm the oldest one. They should have put me in the ground. I didn't want to put them in the ground.
Lee, let me ask you this. To the majority of the folks that listen to this, Tom Cole will be the guy remembered as the person involved in the scandals of the 90s, the ring boy. How would you like your brother, Tom Cole, to be remembered?
Well, I could tell you, one time I was playing football. I was playing football in Yonkers. And my brother came along in his Jeep, and he was parked up at the top of the hill. And he was sitting there, and then I waved to him to come down, and he wouldn't come down. And, maybe this ain't such a pleasant story, but it's kind of funny. He wouldn't come down, and it turned out he wouldn't come down because half the guys on that football field, Tom was with their women, with their girl, And, that was Tom. He was this good-looking guy that women loved.
Mm-hmm.
The way he looked, the way he walked. His wife was a school teacher. His wife was an educated school teacher with a bachelor's degree. Wow. She met Tom and she fell in love with him, and she took Tom in and she taught Tom how to live a normal life, not as a street kid. And they've been together. Well, you have the wedding picture there.
Yep.
That's the last picture where everybody in my family took a picture together. Now some of them are not here no more. And he was funny. He would call us up. He'd be in New York calling us up, waiting, outside of a building for a billionaire to come out. And he'd be waiting for that guy to get in the car, and he'd just be talking to me and stuff. And he used to joke around and go, "Oh, I heard some stock deals today." Because these rich guys are in the back talking stocks. Yeah. And he's sitting up front playing stupid. Da-da-da-da-da. And they're like, this guy's pretty wealthy. And so he that was the street in him. He'd listen to conversations. He would know. That's also called insider trading.
Right. Yeah, and then you got that.
There's nothing they could do to him about it now.
Right.
And he was a very tough kid. He was very honorable. His daughters absolutely worshipped the ground. You see the pictures of his children and how beautiful they are.
Yes.
People could say we have beautiful children and but his daughters are like unbelievably beautiful girls. And I used to kid with Tom. I used to say to him, "You know what? All these girls' hearts you broken, that's why God gave you 3 daughters." Now you're going to go through.
Yeah, now you're going to have to go through you're going to reap what you sowed.
Yeah. Yes. There was an incident with my father one time. My father was sitting on the couch, and my brother used to love annoying my father. And one morning he came with this girl and he said, "Dad, this is my girlfriend. I'm going to marry her." Then he comes back 4 or 5 hours later with another girl and says, "Dad, this is my girlfriend. I'm going to marry her." And then he comes that night with another girl and says to my father, "Dad, I'm going to marry her." My father jumped up and went, "Get out of here." Like that was Tom. That was just who Tom was. He was, my sister Joan got married. And, I appreciate you telling me these stories. My sister Joan got married, and they have a big wedding in upstate New York. And we're wondering where Tom is. Then all of a sudden, Tom shows up in a pair of shorts and a tank top. Everybody there is in a suit. So we forgave him for that. But then when we caught him downstairs making out with my sister's new husband's daughter, it was like, that was Tom. He was just...
I hate to say it, but it sounded like he fit into wrestling pretty good.
Yeah,
He
was
had
a
that
magnet.
kind of just a unique personality.
Yeah, his poor wife, I was like, when she married him and he wants to work, and she's like, because he had that magnetism where where women were attracted right to him, and that's just, what he had. And, he used to get mad when I used to tell him, I think your brother Eddie did better with the girls when he was young, just teasing him. And then he would get mad, and it's like, but, the amazing thing is this little tiny petite school teacher that he fell in love with, and the way she just made him into a better man. And she's devastated. Absolutely devastated. She said, she said to my sister yesterday, what am I going to do tomorrow when I wake up and he's not here?
I can just say I'm so sorry for you and your family to have to go through it. I'm sorry for what Tom went through. As I stated at the beginning of the show, I know in my interactions with them, WWE is the good that they've done for a lot of charities and for a lot of people I've worked directly with them in trying to help some of the wrestling legends. But, like any industry, there's an underbelly to it. And unfortunately, Tom was in the deepest, darkest parts of an underbelly. And I wish he was still with us now. Hopefully this doesn't come across wrong, but, I hope he's made it to heaven quick. Maybe some of your siblings were there to wait for him and guide him in.
Well, he said to me yesterday, and I didn't pick this up, and I should have. He said to me, Lee, I miss Danny so much. And that's my other brother who just died.
Oh, jeez.
And he was planning on going to be with Danny. Wow. There's no doubt.
Well, I hope they're together right now. I hope, I consider you a friend now. I mean, for the past 2 hours with the conversation we've had, how could I not? If there is any kind of charity efforts done for Tom's kids, whether it be for, college tuition in the future and things like that. I know those GoFundMe type accounts are a popular thing nowadays. Please give us any information you have so we can share it on the shows and we can share it on the website and we can share it on social media. Because we want to do everything we can on our end, because this is just something, at the end of the day, you can wrap it up with one simple sentence and say that it should have never happened.
Yes. Well, I appreciate that. And if I get any of that information, I'm sure my sister Maggie might be doing something, and I will let you know.
Please let us know. And we're only in Boston, so we're, in reality, we're not even that far away when you think about it. But anything we left out, anything we missed that you want to add before we go?
Well, you know what? There's so much with this story. I tried to cover the basics, and it's been 2 hours. So, you could talk, I could talk forever about everything. There's a lot of other people out there, and I would ask them to please come forward if this happened to you. Don't be, if you're suffering inside, you need to get help. Don't let these men destroy your lives like they destroyed so many.
And I think
pretty much all.
I think that could be said to anyone, whether they were involved with Mel Phillips and Terry Garvin, or whether, it happened with a religious leader or a school teacher or any aspect of life. If someone's hurt you, try and reach out to someone you trust. Try and find the help that you need, because it might not be easy, but it's out there. And we don't want to see any more tragedies than we already see in this crazy world we're in right now. 2021 has been tough 2020 was even tougher. And like I said, it's out there. You may have to search a little bit, but there's a lot of good people in the world too.
And remember, too, if you're thinking about hurting yourself, just think this much. Today, there's so many devastated people in my brother's house. I mean, and they'll never be the same. So, remember that.
Well, folks, we hope this story has touched you as much as it's touched me. Like I said, if you told me this morning I was going to have this interview today, I would have told you you were nuts. But I think we told a great story. I think we told an honest story. I think we told the story the way you recollect it. It's kind of, like I said, with my past history with WWE, a little awkward to tell it the way it is, but it's the right thing to do, in my opinion. And I think we have something that a lot of people can learn from.
What it comes down to, if Vince McMahon really cared about what happened in his company back then, he is not going to try to be upset with people for reporting the truth.
Let me ask you this. One more question before we go.
Yeah.
If you could say one thing to Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon, what would it be?
I would ask them, was it worth covering it up? Was it worth bringing my brother back to you for an election? You know, was it worth it? You know, why couldn't you just give him the job and let him fairly, you know, have the job? Why did you have to put restrictions on it? You made an agreement to bring him back. He could still be working for you. He would have been a hell of a worker for you if you just were fair to him. And, you know, they would use the excuse that they didn't want Tom around the ring because the fans used to make fun of him and call him names and stuff. Oh, there's the ring boy. Mm-hmm. But you're a big corporation. He went to work in your warehouse. Why did you let Terry Garvin fire him? You know, it should have never happened. Those firings shouldn't go through a man like that. That man was a predator. You were letting a predator control who works in your warehouse. You know? And why do you still do these skits? Why do you still abuse your wrestlers? You know, why do you do all this stuff that you're doing right now? Why are you so unfair to your stars and you just get rid of them? You know, there's nothing nice I have to say to them because there's nothing nice about them. I think that their record over the last 30 years speaks for itself.
Well, as the saying goes, yeah, history speaks for itself, the good and the bad.
Yep. And I thank you for having me on.
Lee, I thank you so much. I can't tell you how touched I am. And all I can say to end it is just, you know, rest in paradise to Tom Cole. I hope he's in a better place right now. And like I said, if there's anything we can do for you guys, please touch base. We'd love to try and help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lee. We'll speak to you soon.